I'm Cat.
And I'm MELO.
And this is Art and Inquiry.
Welcome back. We've been looking forward to this one for quite some time. We've even teased this episode before recording it just because of how much Cat and I love color. So, without any further ado, we're calling this episode Decoding the Rainbow, the Art and Science of Color. We're going to break it all down, explore the color family tree, meet the primary parents, the secondary kids, and even the adventurous cousins, those tertiary ones. All of those come together to form different colors and palettes and things that you can use in your artist toolkit. And we're going to help you on how you can make your designs pop or have a nice subdued effect. So we'll go into the art of it, and then we'll get to the science, crack the code of all those acronyms, that alphabet soup, RGB, CMYK, hex codes, all those hashtags. Things get crazy. And then last but not least, we'll uncover the true secrets that are inside amazing palettes, which is harmony, contrast, and a lot more, which you'll have to tune in to check out. So you'll end this with understanding, how color works. You'll have a blueprint for creating the perfect palette that actually pops. And there is a spoiler at the end because Kat and I, similar to our collage episode, also do a co-host challenge. So make sure you stick around for that in the artist prompt. So with that, we're going to dive right in and start taking the guesswork out of color, stop being so wishy-washy, and start seeing everything in full color.
Ooh, love that. Love that. Love that. Oh, that's wonderful. So a lot of you have a question. Can you use color confidently? We think you can, and we're going to show you how. MELO just covered a lot of the things that we're going to cover. That's here on this little slide here. But what we want for you to take away from this episode is that color isn't scary. It's not something that you should be afraid of. There's a science and an art to it. And that's the question that we are going to answer today.
Yeah, basically, don't feel alone. If you've opened up a color picker and you see all of these colors and you're like, which one? Like, I just want red. Where is red? And there's like 20 different reds. Yeah, exactly. Like, we'll help you. We got you. It's a map. No problem.
Got you. It is a map.
Yeah. So part of what goes into color is the relationships between colors. So let's throw it to the basics. I mean, elementary school, some of us might have learned this a little bit. The wheel looks classier than it did back then because I'm sure we were just with crayons, right? But you have your family tree. So you have primary, that's all the parents. There's 3 of them, blue and red and yellow. So those colors are their own. They're like the core, the source, the beginning. Nothing can create those colors, but those colors can create. And then that's where the secondary comes in. That's the kids. So you mix some of those primary colors, the parents, and you start getting some of these kids. So you have green, orange, and purple. And then last but not least, this is where things get a little wild because think of how big your family can get. You have all these cousins. So that's where you start getting to the different shades of colors and the mixes of colors, like yellow-orange, for instance. Those are the cousins. Can't forget about them because these different families all create different palettes when you put them together, just depending on what kind of vibe you want.
Yeah, and they just keep working together and building and growing and building and growing up until there's just millions and millions of colors, which is why it does seem overwhelming. But just like with your siblings, sometimes some colors get along and sometimes just some colors just don't. And there are a bunch of different family tree harmonies that you can use in order to determine what that's going to be. So here's a list of some of these. These are kind of the accepted artistic variants. If you're really struggling to know, does yellow go with purple? What happens when you mix yellow and purple? What happens if you put green, yellow, and orange together? That would be the analogous color wheel. Triadic would be a triangle, as you can see. Tetradic. I never say that right. It's fine though. That's 2 complementary pairs. So it's kind of like having like 4 siblings that are partners, 2 and 2. And then the square is sort of the same way, but everybody has an equal distance from one another. And then split complementary, which is my personal favorite and my general go-to, is 3 main colors.
Did you guys hear them?
Really?
Kat has favorites when it comes to family members. So let the record show we have it on video that she literally just said that she has favorite family members.
We all do. We just don't all say it.
What's kind of cool though about this look, complementary, triadic, tetradic, like all of these, they sound like really big words and super complicated. But if you look at the different diagrams, all we did is we took that color wheel and we just drew a shape on it.
Look at her.
So if you want to think about it almost in that way, it's like your map in that sense of where you're connecting your point A to point B to point C and which ones you're pulling in. It kind of like helps you navigate the color wheel as opposed to, okay, starting with blue, where do I go from here? Well, what do I want it to do? And then you can make a triangle from there. You can make a square from there. You can make a straight line, and then that helps you balance it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I dig split complementary so much. It's such an easy sort of starting point for me because there are two colors that are definitely going to be like neighborous, harmonious, and whatever else, and then one color that is going to be for emphasis for pop. It's just so easy to start there. Now I don't always do it like that, but it for me. It's just very easy to start there. And then of course we do have monochromatic as well, and monochromatic is such a vibe. Love a monochromatic.
So would you say split complementary is kind of like a mix between complementary and enagulant? Wow, I can talk today.
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. I would say it exactly like that.
We'll keep it in. You guys are welcome. But yeah, that's kind of interesting because it has the dynamics of both of those, but it's together. So that's complicated.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's what I do like. That's one of the reasons I like it so much because it gives a sense of there's like tension and contrast. Contrast is a big vibe for me. I'm sure you guys realize that I like color by this point. And I mean, we've done this will be episode 9. We've done 9 episodes now, and never once have I not had something colorful going on. I love color, but I also love pop. I love contrast, the things that we were referring to, that Melo referred to in the intro. I love to use color in this way because it's almost a subconscious way to direct people's attention. It's a subconscious way to invoke a mood, but we'll go over more of that later.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of words, vocabulary words, lexicon, if you will. These are like the 6 major words that it would be a good idea to understand when you're talking about like color mixing. And when it comes to like digital color, some of these that you're going to need these words specifically because you're going to want to know what sliders to use in order to achieve your desired effect. But when you're talking about analog, these colors come into play even further. So for example, we've got hue. That's just the color that it is. So blue or green or purple or yellow, it's just the color. It just refers to a specific color on the spectrum. So if you wanted to look for red, you're looking for a red hue. Saturation, that has to do with how bright or pale the color is. And the color's intensity too. You know what I mean? Like if you want to desaturate something, that's going to get more and more towards grayscale. Luminosity, that has to do with the brightness. Is it bright, or is it pale and, soft? So tint, when you're tinting a color, you're going to be adding whites in order to lighten the color. It does relate to luminosity in this way, but especially in the digital world, you're not going to sort of notice so much of a difference. These two things go hand in hand. But one thing that people don't always realize is that when you add white to a color, you are also toning it down, which will bring us to tone. So that has to do with the vibrance of a color, and that has to do with like whether if a color is like a fully saturated, fully pigmented color, then that tone, like this bright, vibrant blue here, is going to be a lot more strong, a lot more vibrant. Whereas this adding with the addition of gray, that this tones that down. Get it? Tones that down. Tones that down to a much more reasonable sort of roar. And depending on what you're going for, tone is going to be something that you're using a lot because you're not necessarily lightening it up or darkening it. You're just toning it down. And then of course we have shade. Shade has to do with the darkness. Shade, right? Shade has to do with adding darkness. And that again relates to luminosity, relates to saturation, relates to contrast and all of these things. But you are not really changing the tint or the tone. And one thing I did want to bring up with regards to shade, anybody who does want to create things in the analog world, there's a big thing about not using black in painting. You can use it as long as you understand how shade affects the color. A lot of people just say not to use it, or to mix a richer black in order to come up with, your deepest, darkest shades on your painting. You can use it though. You just have to be careful, because you just have to understand that it is going to mute the tone as well. Speaking of contrast. So these two things are interconnected. Your contrast is how much dimension, how much conflict you're adding into your overall design. So this is going to be depth, dimension, and pop, right? This is the perceived difference between colors, black and white, typical, full, high contrast. And then the harmony is selecting the colors that go well together. These two things are very, very deeply interconnected, because your harmony is going to depend on what sort of depth and dimension that you want to create. Your visual interest, your contrast, your balance, and your harmony, that's a wheel. That's something that all work together to create an overall cohesive whole. Now, I know I said a lot of words, and I know that I used a lot of definitions. I know that that's a lot. We're going to have all of this in the podcast companion so that you can refer back to it.
And one of the big things with this too is, obviously you can memorize what the correct words are to say, but it also helps you understand the difference between some of the colors, or why they read a certain way when you're looking at them in a design. I know we've all, taken a picture, even a selfie, and then you go in just to your phone settings for like the basic editing, right? And some of the options there, it has things like saturation, contrast, luminosity. So now you actually know when you're sliding
What you're
that to the
doing.
left or the right, what you're actually doing and how
Yeah.
you're affecting the colors that are inside that.
And how, if you're, say, for example, trying to use a filter, but you wish it had more contrast, or you wish it was like more, you look at it and you're like, okay, that's not enough variation in color. Now you know that you can then go into the contrast filter and just bump that up a little bit.
Done.
Yeah, that'll help you. This is going to help you. These are, knowing those words isn't necessarily the point of those previous slides. Knowing those words isn't the point. It's just giving you tools, and you'll have all this, like I said, in the podcast companion. So if you ever need it, you can refer right back.
Yeah, so a lot of the art of color is like how we're perceiving it, but let's get into a little bit of the science too, of like, how does this actually work? What are we seeing when we see color, and how does it vary when we think about it in a digital sense versus a print sense, and different color spaces? So let's jump into some of that. All right, so science of color. Color meets the eye. So how do we see color? So light reflects off objects. You guys have seen probably like pictures of a prism and then the rainbow that's created from it. That's a real thing that really is needed to be able to see it and how your eye perceives it. We can see tons of different colors. However, infrared, ultraviolet are outside of human perception. So basically there's this color wheel, and not to be confused with the other color wheel. This is gamut, and gamut is perceived light. So the things that are actually visible. And if you take a look on the little picture we have here, we have this guy. You might have heard of him, Sir Isaac Newton. He pretty much did all this famous science stuff back in the day, something with like an apple as well. Well, he was actually the first person who created the color wheel by bending light through a prism. And this kind of starts the genesis of, if I'm talking about a color or want to create a color, or I want to reproduce something in a certain color, I need to be able to define what that color is. So that's where we go into the different color spaces, and we're going to jump right into some of our favorites. So color spaces. You might have heard these acronyms, and this is where we get a little bit into alphabet soup. So definitely take a look at this page on your own time, so you can dig into any of these that you might have heard, or even if you're trying to like calibrate a monitor or work on video settings, some of these will look strikingly familiar, and you're like, I just want my video to export. I don't know which one of these to pick. These will come in handy. But the big ones we're really going to dive into for color spaces are RGB, which is additive. This is a key part to remember. So it's all about the light. In digital, it's all about the light. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense because you're illuminating this black screen. So RGB, additive, light, got it. CMYK, so that's subtractive. That's all about the pigment for print. So I guess I could have better explained the RGB being red, green, blue. And then CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. And now you're probably thinking, well, you just said key. That is not a color. Yeah, that's not a color, but it's black. So that is how you remember it. And we're going to dive into those a lot deeper so you can see what the differences are. And if like we've ever worked together on a project, one of my first questions, if we're working on something is how are you going to be using this design? Because it has such a play into how the design's created and the color space that we're choosing to create it, if you're going to be printing it or if it's going to be digital. So on here, you see cracking the code. This is the science of color. You've got these two main ones that we talk about the most. RGB on the left, this is the one, again, is about light, additive. So it's used to create visible colors by mixing light waves to create bright, vivid hues. Think of things like on your computer, on a mobile device, anything that is digital. And it leverages, the RGB. And what's really cool about RGB is when you add those three together, you get white. And then black for
Digitally. You get white digitally.
Okay. But what's cool though is if you have none of those colors, you get black. So when you talk to, like, say, you're working on something that's digital, you're working on something that's print, you're literally speaking opposite languages when you're talking about some core pieces, white and black, of how those spaces work. So yeah, RGB, that's everything, websites, selfies, digital stuff, anything that has pixels, screens, things like that.
So of course they had to complicate things because the way light works is, or the way color works is through light. So RGB, though screens were not invented when the color wheel or when the spectrum and when Isaac Newton discovered all of this, those screens were not invented back then. It is actually closer to how we perceive color than in print. We talked a little bit about this during the Mocha Moose episode, actually. We talked a little bit about, like, how do you represent a specific color on a page? And to do that, you need to dive into the subtractive color model. So we're going to do, how that works is all of those colors combine together to produce black. And so basically they combine to absorb light so that so basically what the pigment does is that you're putting it together to absorb all of the different wavelengths of all of the different colors until the one that you specifically want is the one that meets the eye. So they call it subtractive. They call it subtractive because you're taking away everything else in order to get to what you actually want. So of course we have cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. Key means black. And these are the primaries of prints. And how that works too is that it's tiny dots that it's produced onto the page of all the different colors until you just get what you're looking for. And it's responsible for literally everything that's physical. So anything that has a hue, any hair dye, makeup, any of these sorts of things are created by mixing pigments. Paints, it's another big one as well. That's why I specifically jumped in with our red, green, and blue. If you mix them together physically, like with paint or with pigment or with ink, that's gonna create like a muddy, yucky black. Like that's what'll end up happening with red, green, and blue. It doesn't actually look all that great. And then the colors that combine with magenta, yellow, and cyan are kind of interesting because magenta, which is a pinky vibe, right, and yellow, they actually combine to produce red. And then cyan and magenta, they combine to produce blue. And then cyan and yellow, they combine to produce green. And so now we've come full circle. That's how the two color stories relate together. And then you mix all three and you get the rich black that I was talking about with you before. And so your key is your registration black. This is getting a little bit into like print design. Maybe it's more technical than you need, but the reason why it's called that is because it's the key by which they use to calibrate the rest of everything else.
It's kind of like your baseline. Like this
your
is,
baseline.
yeah.
And then you'll also find in print design that there's a color that's called rich black. And if you actually print those out, key definitely does seem less saturated. Rich black seems more black if possible, but really it's just more colors put together, not just specifically a black pigment. All right.
Yeah, so I know when we were talking a little bit about the RGB piece, some of you might have thought, well, every time I've seen like RGB or colors when I'm adjusting something or I'm picking a color, there's always this like hashtag thing with a bunch of letters and numbers. It seems chaotic. And somehow, when those numbers and letters change, they create a color.
Mhm.
Well, I promise you,
Mhm.
hex codes, super easy. They're basically color hashtags. They represent, in computer language, essentially, like what color is that? So instead of just creating random hashtags for every single color that you can possibly think of, it's actually a little formula. It's a little bit of science, a little bit of math. So the first two digits, those represent red. The next two are green. The next two are, if you paid attention, blue, RGB, right? So the reason that you have letters and numbers, though, is it gives us the ability to go longer, because if this was just numbers, there would be less combinations. We needed to get all the way up to what, 255, something like that, right?
Mhm.
So by mixing the alphabet and alphabet letters and numbers, wow, it note each one individually. So the key part to this, though, is understanding that a hex code is essentially the representation of a color. And if you get comfortable with hex codes, you could look at a hex code and tell right off the bat if it's like a reddish color, a bluish color,
Mhm.
just by some
100%.
yeah, some of the numbers and letters that you're seeing there. And then you could also see if they're like inverses. Like one of my favorite is like black and white.
Mhm.
Black and white, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then
Mhm.
F, 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 F. You'll typically see these like as the starting point when you're pulling up some sort of like color that has a picker with the different RGB.
Another thing, now I don't know if they did this on purpose because the other letters don't necessarily vibe with this at all, but I always think of FFF as full, full, full. So full, 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 like
I
the
like
the
that.
most. Yeah, because so you can kind of, because otherwise, what does that mean? You know what I mean? So I think of it as
Yeah.
like full, 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 and like this color right here. This is the fully saturated, fully luminosity of the complete hue of red. That's FF.
Yep.
So.
Exactly.
Uh-huh. Alrighty. Oh, palettes. Stunning. Yes. Okay, cool. So yeah, speaking of calculations, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about color palettes. This is where it gets a little scary. So we talked a little bit about the color family relationships. We talked about the family tree. We talked about different color harmonies that you can use, but how do you actually put that together? Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you make a palette with that information? So I thought when we thought about doing this episode, I really kind of wanted to show two different ways in which you could do this, because there are tools out there. There are some really, really great crap. There are some really, really great tools out there. So yeah. Okay, so on this thing, this is where we're at. This is what I was just literally talking about. We'll probably leave this in too because it's funny. I forgot about this. I was covering the slide on the like on the other.
Catalyst didn't know that she had the cheat sheet in here,
I
so you're
literally did.
welcome.
Yeah. I know, and we just went over it too. That's what's funny. But that sort of shows how present I am in this moment that I had forgotten.
See? I
Yeah,
love that. I love
me
that.
too. Me too. So yeah, so step one, you really want to define a vibe and purpose. This actually is the most important step, at least in my humble opinion. You really want to understand the mood and the audience that you are conveying this color story to. I mean, is this supposed to be something? Are you making a design for a luxury vehicle? Then you probably don't want it to look like a circus, things of that nature. And especially if you're creating like fine art and you're trying to say something specific, or digital art and you're trying to say something specific, knowing the mood and knowing what you're going for, knowing what you want to convey, that's vital, because color is, like I've said this before, but color is a subconscious way to communicate with the brain. And
Mhm.
then it's a good idea to choose a base hue as well. That'll be step two. It's a good idea to choose a base hue, a dominant color, something that you know you want to do. For a lot of people, would just be a color they like, and that's fine. You don't have to get too serious about it. Now, there are different psychological things with relationship to each of the colors, and you can get deep into that. We thought about getting deep into that for this
I love that stuff
episode.
too.
I know, because I love that stuff. It's so good. Like blue is always a very calmy sort of
Yeah.
vibe, very calming
Makes you
kind of
feel
vibe.
safe,
Mhm,
confident.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's why a lot of
Very
people choose like like blue for a bedroom wall color, like when they're decorating their
mhm.
house. It
It's
just
also used in banking, right? Like
mhm,
banking or like, different things that are trying to establish trust, things like that.
calm,
Whereas, yeah, if you pick
self-assured. They want you to
orange,
chill
for
out.
instance, it's
Yeah.
wild, like
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's why, like if you think about like McDonald's or Burger King or these fast food logos, the orange and the red, that's chaotic. It's fast. It's chaotic. It makes you
yep.
feel, "Oof," go, 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 get through the drive-through, get your stuff, eat it, so you don't focus on the taste.
Or so they turn tables faster, right? And run through
Right?
customers
Yeah, yeah,
faster
yeah.
to
No,
serve
that is
food
literally,
faster. Yeah.
and it used to be that way. It used to be that all the fast food dining rooms were decorated that way, but then they realized that it might be nice if people didn't feel like that when they were eating.
Yeah.
Um,
Or they
so
might order
now
more. It's like, "Oh, maybe I
they
guess I
might
do want an
know.
apple pie. Maybe I do
Mhm.
need a shake."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But at first, though, it was all about getting people in and out and fast, because that's what
Yep.
literally fast food was. So you're going to be picking your dominant color, and you can use different, psychological reasons to do it, or you can just go with something that's your favorite. It's up to you. That's fine. And then you want to expand on that with the variants. And we covered that earlier. We talked about my favorite kid, et cetera, that nature. We're going to cover it a little bit more later too. So I'm just going to leave this here for now. You can always come back to this slide as well. And then you're going to be picking a color scheme like we talked about. And then this is the key and the most important part. You do want to test and balance out the palette. And there are tools you can use for this if you're worried. Like if you don't know if something works, 60-30-20 is reliable color. I mean 60-30-10, because I always give color 110%. Like 60-30-10% is
And
a
my
very
cat does
decent.
the art slides and not the science ones,
Right,
just
right, right,
saying.
right, right, right. Right, right, right. Although my day job uses a lot of math, but yeah, it's very funny. It's very funny though. Because I always say that wrong. I literally always say that wrong. Um, but that's a good rule for reliable color harmony. So that's 60% of. We'll cover this a little bit more in depth later, but just briefly, that's 60% of one color. That's your dominant color. That's 30% of like a complementary sort of, or it doesn't have to be complementary. It's 60% of your kind of secondary color, and then
Secondary,
10% of your pop color. That's going to be your big highlights, things you really want people to pay attention to. And there's a lot of tools out there that'll help you with this, but it's a very good idea, especially in this modern age, to check for accessibility. So check your palette, run your palette through a couple of accessibility tools just to see if it works. It's helpful. All righty. So I talked about tools. This is one of them. And it's one of my favorite tools, honestly, because it has a lot of accessibility features and functions and things of that nature. But this is the Adobe Color Picker. And what I chose to do when coming up with these potential example palettes was I took one of the colors that we use in this deck, which was this vibrant green that's kind of a rough one to use, right?
right.
Like I knew that red and green together, that's going to read Christmas. So I ran it through the Adobe Color thing, and I let the tool pick it. I just let the tool pick it, and that's what these are. So this is an example, a real world example of complementary color, analogous color, triadic color, monochromatic, which I think was the most successful of all of the things that the computer did, tetradic, square, and then split complementary, which is also successful. You can see why I kind of use it as an easy button thing.
Again, her favorite child, I'm just
Mhm.
saying, she might
I
be
mean,
slighted.
analogous, which is kind of the neighboring ones where it's all along the same on the family
Yeah.
tree. This works fine too in this sort of computer picked the palette vibe. But this one I kind of like though, actually, because it has a different feeling, like than any of the other ones. This one feels very much like we're in a forest, like we're in the woods,
Mm,
and perhaps we have a cabin. You know what I mean? It doesn't read as Christmas; it reads as like camping, and
I like
that's
that.
yeah, me too. But
When it makes like, it gives you opportunity, like so looking at that split complementary palette,
mhm,
you
yeah,
have some of those rustic, earthy type, okay, I get the forest thing, but then you have the
mhm,
pop of red, which for some reason I'm thinking of like an apple, like, I
yeah.
don't know, maybe Red Riding Hood, something that pops.
Yeah.
So if you're
Yes.
designing something, or if this was a website, for instance, those would be the accents that would do, like you would drag the not customer, like viewers, I guess,
Uh-huh.
perception to. So you want to
Yeah.
draw attention to this. You're going to use the red, for instance,
Mhm.
against the other ones to make the contrast and like say, hey, look over here.
Mhm. Yeah, really, I think if I were picking from this color palette, I think I would probably toss the orange and the high full hue orange and red and go with the green and
Mm,
these. I think that's what I would do personally. Like if I had to use just those colors. But that's your so these are gonna be like your 10% or your 30%, and then
mhm.
these are gonna be your 60%. Um, and I mean, you don't again, you don't have to do it that way, but this is just sort of these are tools that can help you in order to do it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I did want to say about the Adobe Color Picker is that they do have an accessibility tab that you can then go through once you've come up with a palette that you like on their system. You can go through and then try it in different real world ways, and it will tell you whether or not like what different combinations of that palette are going to be okay in an accessibility sense. So I do love that. It's very useful. It's very helpful because sometimes you just don't know what is gonna be needed sometimes, you know? And it's helpful to just have a tool to just tell you. But then Coolers was that tool that Mello had suggested for me, and I
Mhm.
went on there. I don't have a Coolers, like, membership, and it wouldn't do the color families automatically. So I was like, "Well, this is where we need to start talking about vibes." So I did the exact same thing on Coolers, but I chose it. I chose the colors. So we did start with the base of that like very, very complicated to work with green, that very like Christmassy sort of candy green. And these are the ones that I came up with for the same harmonies. And this is kind of complementary, analogous, triadic, which I love in this one.
Triadic
I
is
think this,
neat.
I
Yeah.
know it was so pretty. I was like, these pinks are beautiful. Wow. And I wouldn't when I saw this green, pink would not have been an immediate choice. But like
Yeah.
when put next to the dark purple or even the lavender with that green, that's a vibe, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if I hadn't have tried to make a triadic palette, I might not have seen this color combination. And then we have tetradic, which I always pronounce wrong, second time in the video. And then we have square, and then of course split complementary once again, and monochromatic. We shouldn't forget monochromatic, even though it's not exactly the same thing as these others. But this tool is freaking rad too, because what you
Yeah.
can do with this one is you can upload a PNG and you can like try out your colors within it. Or you can
Yeah.
use one of their PNGs. You can try out your colors within it. You can see kind of like what works. If you're a visual like me, like I want to know if I'm using this bright yellow as a highlight color, I want to know how that's actually going to read against this blue. I want to know how that's actually going to read. And so this tool can help you with that if you want to use that tool.
Yeah. Even if you found like an image and you're like, I just like the way this feels. Like it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're trying to create, but you're just like,
Mhm.
I just like the way this makes me feel.
Yeah.
Upload that, and then it can pull out the key colors and help you build a palette to create something similar for whatever you're working
Mm.
on.
That's another great way to make these. If you don't want to, if you forget all the stuff about these color harmonies, that's using a photograph or any sort of image is a great way to find a color palette because of specifically that. Because you know what looks good.
Yeah.
Color is subconscious. You, as you're looking at it, you know what looks good to you. You know what makes you feel what you want to feel. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it seems mystifying when you say all these words that sometimes I can't say. It seems mystifying, but it's not. You know what looks good.
Yeah. Well,
You
keep
know
in
what
mind
looks
too,
good.
like inspiration comes from everywhere, right? So you
100%.
could just be at a store and walking down an aisle and you're like, oh, I like the fabric of this, like this random
Yeah.
print. You're like, not that I would wear it, not that I'm into it, but that like looks really neat. It's like just snag a picture of that. Then you have some
100%.
colors to play with and build a palette for it and create something cool.
One of the things I used to love to do is to walk around, like take a walk, because it really helps if you're like struggling with a project or you've reached sort of uh, an impasse, like a creative impasse. You know when that is. You know what I mean? You're out, you're doing a project and just like you're changing things, but it's just you're like eh. You reach a creative impasse. I like to go for a walk and kind of just look around at the colors in nature or in the
Yeah.
city or wherever I happen to be because and really evaluate them from a kind of a color perspective and kind of a how they make me feel perspective. You know, the like muted tones against like something vibrant. Like maybe you're seeing the tones of a city, like the grays and the whatever, but someone walks by wearing a bright red jacket. How does that make you feel? That kind of thing.
Mm, I love that.
I do too. So here's a few more tips, just to kind of go over what we just discussed. Here's a few more tips for a perfect palette. Again, we talked about the 60-30-20 rule for balanced design because you should always give color.
Overachievers.
You should
Overachievers.
always give color 110%. So yeah, this is a slide that explains what this is. So it's like main color for the base, background, secondary color to complement and add contrast or visual interest in some manner. Like this is definitely complementing your main color. I mean, also your accent color, but the secondary and the main color should be working hand in hand. They're friends. And then the 10% accent color for pops of attention. These are the tools of the trade that we talked about it as well. And then this is kind of like an example that I thought people might like. Like I just thought you, the viewer, might enjoy it because this is where I see 60-30-10 the most. And that just might be like the algorithm of the things that are presented to me. But I see it the most in room design and
Yeah.
interior decorating. Like how do you make a room look expensive, look lush, look fabulous? How do you do that? How do you put a yellow pillow on a sage green couch? How do you make that work? And what colors goes with those two things? And so this is from the spruce. It's just sort of an example. This is kind of like the mock-up, and then this is the actual room.
That's
So
kinda
the
crazy, like, 'cause you
right?
start thinking about just different pictures you've seen in magazines or things on commercials, and now you realize that it's almost templatized, like,
It is.
it's calculated color, right?
It
At the
is.
end of
It's
the day.
100% calculated color, and it's also really helpful too because not everybody who's going to be decorating. We all have a room. Well, that's if you have a room, then you have a room. Like we all, the people, those of us who have a room are going to need to decorate it in some manner, unless you're like me and you just turn everything into a studio. But but how do you even do that? Like, how do you do that? How do you pick something that's gonna like not assault your senses? You know what I mean? And a lot
Yep.
of people just go based on like, oh, I like black and I like orange and I like, I'm trying to think of a color that would not go with that. Sage green. Actually, that could work. That could actually work.
It kinda depends though, right? Which palette are we going for? What's the
Which
percentage of
tone?
each of them? Like, how much of each color? So, it's arguable.
It is
Makes
arguable. That
sense.
is
And I
arguable.
think too, if
But
you're
yeah.
listening to this episode and you haven't been watching any of this, as our typical reminder, we have this whole entire presentation that we've been walking you through, tons
Mhm,
of resources, links, deep dives into other things in the podcast companion. So don't forget to click the link in the description, go to
mhm.
our website. You'll be able to look at the whole podcast companion, has everything we talk about. So you don't have to feel like you have to write notes, while watching this or
Oh yeah, 100%.
so we got you. We got you. And we actually have some special stuff in it for this one, which we're going to go
We
into in a
sure
little bit.
do.
Mhm.
We sure do. So we've touched upon this just a little bit, but I'm going to send it over to Miller for accessibility and inclusivity.
Yeah. So Kat had mentioned, when you're looking at different palettes, wanting to make sure that they're accessible. Like, what does that really mean? Making sure that they not just look good, but that they're readable and legible. And this piece is so incredibly important. It only becomes more and more important the more things that we have digitally, because it is easier actually to change the accessibility of things. So let's jump into what accessibility actually means. Like, you can create gorgeous designs, but at the end of the day, if people aren't able to appreciate what you're creating by seeing it the way it's created, it's kind of pointless. So, number one, inclusivity, better design for everybody. Interesting fact, I'm not even going to say my typical fun fact. Interesting fact, one in
Mhm.
12 men, one in 200 women are colorblind. Colorblind of some sort. There's different degrees, different types. But if you think about that, that is extremely likely that someone who's looking at what you're creating, be it a random graphic that you're going to post on social, or a logo that you're designing, or just a beautiful digital painting maybe that you're working on, keeping in mind that there are a lot of people out there that wouldn't be able to see or understand or appreciate what you're creating if it's not accessible is important. So From a digital perspective, I've done a lot with accessibility on like website designs, UIs on different mobile apps and things like that. And there's some really important, I guess you can call them kind of like foundational pieces that you want to focus on. Number one is high contrast text. Make sure it's readable. So if this is like a poster, for instance, or a social post, making sure that you have high contrast so it's readable. Avoid using color alone to convey meaning. I can't stress this enough. If someone is colorblind or not able to see the spectrum in the same way that you do, making sure that there's some sort of visual way that it can still be understood, your point of it, without seeing it in the color that you designed it. And then lastly, use patterns, icons, labels for clarity. This kind of dabbles into the earlier ones, is, making sure that there's a way that someone can understand the point without it only being color. And you see this a lot of times where you'll have like maybe it's a dark background and someone has like a navy blue text as an
Mhm.
example. Don't get me wrong, those are great colors. I happen to wear those a lot.
Yeah.
But if I'm designing something and I want someone to be able to read the text, I just point blank can't put navy blue on black. So what can I do?
Yeah.
And so this really comes into play in a lot of different places, even outside of like professional projects in your day to day. And I'm sure you've actually experienced accessibility and a lot of the, I guess, things that we've been doing as a society to improve accessibility in design, whether you realize it or not. So
Well,
there are tons of standards that have been developed and a lot of different online tools that are totally free that you can use to check the accessibility of a design or to even check your palette, like Catalyst was mentioning earlier, just to make sure that everybody can see and appreciate what you're trying to do.
but
So,
yeah, yeah. One of the
yep.
things I really love, oh, here, before we get into that, one of the things I really love about the Adobe Creative Checker and some of these as well is that you can see what it actually would look like. That it goes through and it shows you what it would look like with some of the different color divergences. So you can see what your color palette is going to look like to somebody with the red green aberrations, somebody with the blue yellow aberrations. And that's helpful because then you can at least make sure it makes sense in both ways, like in all the different ways that you might, all the typical ways. Um, and you can see what it looks like too, which can give you a little bit of a look into their world. Even
Yeah.
though none of us will ever see things exactly the same way, like I don't see the exact same things that you do, obviously, and things of that nature because we have different shaped eyes, our brains are different, etc. It's nice to get just like kind of a glimpse into like why this is important and what someone's going to see and make sure that you're designing kind of with them in mind as well, and give them a good experience. So yeah, I mean, one of the ways in which this first really started coming up for me was in games. I'm a gamer. We're all gamers, right? Well, not all of us in the audience, but Mello and I. And
Yeah.
in Fortnite specifically, I remember being so impressed with their colorblind tools
Mhm.
where you could do different things. And they've got here the llama in there, which it shows you kind of like what if you can't see the llama in one of these, then you can change the settings in order to figure out. And this is going to show you what all the weapons are going to look like. This is going to help you out when you're in the game, right? We've got all these games, and if you play a game for a very long time, oh, and this is an example of using symbols that Mello was talking about earlier. This is from Among Us. This is one of the tasks you can do if you're not the imposter, right? It's the wiring diagram, and it's my favorite one, honestly, because it's so easy. Um, it's literally my favorite. Like if I see the wiring diagram, I'm going there first.
It's
And
better than the
the
credit card swipe one because I
so
cannot
much.
swipe that to save my
Me
life.
neither.
Yeah, I'm all
Or
about the
the one where you have to like pull up the little
wiring.
thing from the wallet and then try to
Oh my
type it in while you're still holding it
god.
up. Yeah. Yeah,
Ugh.
yeah, yeah. That one is those ones are so hard, but this one is so easy. And as you can see, there's these little symbols here. So not only have they used high contrasty colors that are not gonna they're very different colors. Even those with color operations are gonna see them differently. They've also chosen to put symbols on. So now I know I can take this one with the triangle in the red up to this one with the other triangle in the red. And there's a symbol as well. And that's so important. I really, until we started doing this episode, I really never realized how important that was until we started thinking and where this was being shown. And I didn't realize how many people had color divergent, color divergent blindness, you know what I mean? I never noticed that. So then here's an example of bad. This is bad accessibility. So in here, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what it looks like to someone that has a color blindness. And I think what this developer may have thought was that the faces and like the way the eyes are looking and the shape of the mouth, the tiny little itty bitty faces, thought that was enough of a change. But if you can see it, it's not. Like
Yeah,
it's
that's
really not.
unplayable. Like, that is
Yeah.
unplayable.
It is literally unplayable. I would never if I saw a game like this, I would immediately delete it. First of all, I
Yeah.
don't like the colors that this is, but secondly, it's horrible. Like it's so hard. How would you even know what to click? You just be mashing buttons. Like you just be clicking on your phone screen. I'm assuming this is a mobile game. And, if you're ever wondering if you do have color blindness in any way, you're ever wondering or any sort of accessibility issue, you're ever wondering if you can play a game. A lot of games are getting way, way better about just building this into them in the first place. But if you wanna play an older game or something of this nature, there's a website called Can I Play That? That will help you to determine what games aren't gonna actually hurt you. I believe they cover epilepsy in there as well and other
Yeah.
games like that. So yeah, it's everything that if you wanna be a gamer, but you have some special circumstances that you need to make sure are met, you go to this website and you can find that out. I didn't know about that until this episode either.
Yeah, the website's pretty
Alright.
neat. They do, different papers and things like that on games and different analysis on basically, is this accessible? What things are good? Where are there opportunities? And it's just really great to see, like, the gaming community get really around it, as rally around it as well, because
Yeah,
it's a missed opportunity that so many, I'm sure, wanted to experience and haven't been able to. And it's something that in a lot of cases, like adding an icon or even just tweaking color, can literally make that game available to so many more people that can enjoy it.
100%. 100%. And I mean, gaming is I mean, think what you want about gaming. I'm sure you all have your own opinions about gaming, but for me, it's an excellent way to kind of relax and dive into a story that I'm helping to tell myself. I play a lot of role-playing games, so that I'm helping to tell that story myself. It's more interactive than watching TV, but if I suddenly didn't have that available to me, let's say there was an RPG that came out with no accessibility features or something that maybe I didn't like, and it was hurting my eyes, which I need in order to do things like this with Nala. And I need my eyes to be functioning properly, right? If I couldn't play that, that would be so sad. Like I'm making games accessible to all is a no rule and vibrant goal. The gaming community has really, really been great about that recently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been through so many things so far,
We have.
right?
We
And
have.
we thought that while, don't get me wrong, everything we've covered is so incredibly helpful, insightful. I feel like we have more understanding of the things that we technically already had in our toolkit, but how to actually use them to really complement a design or make a room not look so terrible. So we thought that, similar to what we had done in our collage episode, where we did our own co host challenge, we would do one for this episode because we've been talking about color for all of the time since this year. What? I guess since the beginning of this year. Yeah.
Literally, yeah.
Beginning of this
We're
year.
always saying we're
So,
always saying, well, that depends on it's additive or subtractive. And now you know what
right.
that means.
I
Now you
think
know what that
actually one of our
means.
first shorts was us going back and forth
Mm.
back to black.
Mm.
And then I'm like, isn't black, is it all the colors or none of the colors? And then she says, is it additive or subtractive? So boom, here's a throwback without it ever being planned. We had to do a co-host challenge. We had to take this a step further, put a lot of the things that we've been talking about into action and actually walk you through our process too. Because besides understanding how things work, we thought it'd be valuable for you to see it actually from each of our perspectives, because we're totally different people, right? We perceive things different and we also use different mediums a whole lot as well. So our challenge was, we would start with a line art or a coloring page design. So as you can see, this is our line art. And both of us had this same exact design. And we had it as like PDF and PNGs. So technically you could print it and use it. You could use it digitally. But all we had to do was create a color palette and color it. Like that's super easy, right? So this is our glow up, tone down challenge. And what I find really interesting about how we approached this is we did not beforehand talk about what colors each of us was going to use. Literally just started with this. We both went our own directions. The first time we saw what each other created was when we put it into here for you for this episode. So get
Yep, yep.
excited.
I get
It's
excited.
inside our minds. This is pretty epic.
Okay, well, let's get inside my mind a little bit. So this is about applied color theory. This is my creative process. Cat's creative process. Love that for me. So my inspiration, I wanted to go bold. I wanted to go high contrast, and I knew also because I knew that I was going to be covering a lot of the analog component of this. I knew I wanted to try to use CMYK, but I wanted to do it digitally, right? Because I just did. That's what I wanted to do. So I actually literally selected as my color palette cyan, magenta, and yellow. So cyan is going to be my 10%, magenta is my 60%, yellow is my 30%. I also knew that digitally I wanted to use fine art techniques. So I I did create layer masks and I did do some digital things in order to keep lines smooth and things of that nature. And I fully masked out the background so that I could change it whenever I wanted. Because there was a version of this where I had where I actually did a background with like cloudiness and whatever else. There was a version of it that looked like that. It just didn't really work with the vibes I was going for. So but then I did have like a new layer for each level of detail as if I was letting the paint dry. So I built up the color. You can kind of see the underpainting layer here. That's I built up the color slowly over time over different layers. And then I would use a layer also for important elements. So her eyes are a separate layer. There's a layer for the blue flowers, specifically the blue flowers. There is a layer for the leaves, things of that nature. And then all antithetical to what I've just said about all this like artsy fine art stuff, I used math to get my mixes. I literally used percentages and ratios to try to achieve color harmony between CMYK. I did math and I kept the numbers in the 60-30-10 range. So like to get her skin tone, for example, that's a mix of mostly yellow. I've got some magenta in there, I have white in there, and that's how I arrived at that. And I literally only use cyan, magenta, yellow, and white actually in order to create that skin tone. So that's where that comes from. But that was my process. Now let's go to mellow.
I find that interesting too, that Kat had went instantly to CMYK, and I'd actually be kind of curious to see what hers looks like if printed, since
Me
her
too.
color space is different. So I went a different approach. I of course went RGB, right? Because I like combining things and making white because we're just all about that.
Mhm.
But instantly when I look at this design, it just screamed to me like Americana, like vintage Americana vibes. So the first color that comes to my mind is blue. Right after that comes red, and we'll fill in the rest later, right? So I knew that, I was going to have kind of like that deep, rich, almost like a sapphire blue. And then I wanted a red that went with that too. And since I was going vintage, I wanted it to feel a little bit more muted. I didn't want it bright and loud. So that's essentially where I started. And when I came up with the palette, I used Procreate for my iPad. And I actually used only like two different brushes, actually. So I used my typical MELO liner that I use for pretty much everything that I do. It's just like a clean outline type tool. I'll do some of that with the shading as well as the airbrush. That's another one of my favorite brushes to use. So we'll go into when I actually show you the design where I use those. And technique wise, I really just used the airbrush piece and color fill. So I leveraged a lot of the digital tool capabilities. I also used in Procreate, you can easily pull up the different colors. You can pull up the little wheel, and then you can actually pick different harmonies. So you can choose if you wanted it to be any of the ones actually that we talked about. I think they're all pretty much there now that I think about it. Yeah, split complement. Yeah, I think they're actually all there. So you can always play
There's
around with
honestly
those too.
probably a few more in Procreate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are more than
Cool.
even the ones that we had talked about. We just talked about like the big ones. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I used a lot of the digital tools, right? Like if it's there, why not? Because at the end of the day, I'm still creating that vision. So
Mhm.
essentially I like if you actually wanted to know how I go about coloring a page, because I've gotten this question actually a bunch. I create like that base layer. So the first layer that has the actual image, that's my reference. So that layer I mark as a reference. And then every bit of color I add there forward is then hooked into that reference. So I'm never actually destroying the original one, which is important because I want to be able to go back. I want to remove layers. I want to make some of the layers opaque, which is a big like, I guess it's not a secret because a lot of people do it, but that's like one of my like pieces that's pretty much in everything that I do is I use a lot of opacity, and then kind of build my layers that way, as opposed to using different shades of colors. I choose to go the opacity route with like a black and a white. So that's like my thought process behind it. But how
I
these
think
turned out, mind blowing.
by contrast, by the way, Bella was talking about how she colored that. By contrast, by the way, I used this standard normal mouse, and I
Is that
colored it
that's
that I
like
was
from
going to.
1995? Where did you
It's
get that,
it's
Matt?
it's not. It's from my new computer, but I haven't upgraded it. I have several mice that I could put on here, but I literally am probably gonna do that after we're done here. But I wanted to make sure that the mouse that was here when we recorded this episode was the one that I used to create that piece, because I wanted to do just that. Um, all
So I
right.
think knowing that, after she told me
Oh,
that, I can't tell you how much she deserves so
mhm,
much props because I personally, there is no way I would color
mhm.
with a mouse. Like I I would literally have just square lines, scribbles of color. I have no idea how you did it. So I
You
mean
just
that in
make it you
itself,
just make
like
it honestly, it's a lot the same as, but this is why I mask everything out, because you just make the brush bigger. Like, instead of doing a fill, you're just doing a bigger brush.
it's wild.
Yeah,
Wild.
yeah, totally. All right, well, let's talk about the reveal. Me first, me first. Today, I give you CMY Slay, and that's
Wow.
where we're at.
Bonus points on the best title, by the way. He's like, I'm gonna approach this from CMYK.
Mhm.
CMY
CMY
slay.
Slay. And I just came up with that, like, that just occurred to me. I didn't start with that title. Like, by any means did I start with that title. When Mello put her title in, I was like, "Oh, right, I need to put a title. Hold on, what do I do? What do I do?" And I sat here staring at the side, and I was like, "Oh, I know. I got it. We're good. We're good here. I got it." So yeah, this is all the different CMYK colors, and you can kind of see the, like, I used Mello was talking about using an airbrush and things of that nature. I used like wet media brushes that are, it's sort of like a brush that you put on the airbrush, right? So that it behaves differently and adds a little bit of texture and tonal range. I built highlights up. So like, if the lips are a good example here, because you can see that there's like highlights and shadows and things of that nature. I built that up. Like, I would put the color down, the base color originally, and then I would build in different layers. We did this with the hair as well. The hair is another good example. I started with sort of the magenta, and then I built in the highlights, and I built in the shadows and
So
things
when
of
you're
that
building
nature.
in the shadows and the highlights, I guess
Mhm.
what colors are you applying to build those?
So for this one, I had come up with, so again, we talked about me just using cyan, magenta, and yellow, but I had also pulled in. I knew purple had to come into play. Listen, I just, it is my favorite color, and I knew it had to come into play. I knew I could get a decent purple from cyan, from straight up cyan and straight up magenta without changing the tones too much. So I made a purple, and I decided to use purple as the line work. By the way, also I converted to a deeper dark purple as well. Actually, kind of like this color, to be fair. Um,
Is that planned? That kind of feels planned now that you're dressing.
no, honestly, no, but it's not surprising. Like, me using a warm purple for something is not surprising. I either use a warm purple or a cool purple, and you know, I mean, that's kind of my two options. So there you go. But yeah, so I did build that purple color into things, because I knew I wanted a color that was going to complement the magenta, but bring in and make it so that the cyan didn't look out of place. Because I knew that was going to be my accent color, and I knew it was going to be her eyes and the flowers. And since my vibe was like tropical, I wanted the flowers to really pop, and I wanted her eyes to really pop, because I just like eyes.
I love the
So
use of purple on here, Catalyst. Like it's gorgeous and it also kind of just like carries through. It makes it feel really cohesive. And then I
thank
think
you.
about the color palettes and the what were you calling it, 60, 30, 20 because you're
Yeah,
110.
yeah,
But just how you leverage the accent colors to
yeah.
really make certain parts of this pop so it doesn't all wash out. Like you're looking at first, I look at her eyes and the flowers and I'm like, boom. And then I'm like,
There you go.
wow, the hair, stunning. And then the dress. There's even just intricacies of how you accented different things. And at the end of the day, too, your technique to be able to make this feel more real, like it's like made textured. There is like depth to it, I think is really neat.
Yeah, I use a lot of different brushes, but like I used they're standard Adobe Photoshop brushes that you can just pull. Like they come with the most recent versions of Photoshop. So I was also trying to keep this accessible for anybody who happened to have Photoshop to do something and recreate it. But yeah, they're standard wet media oil painting sort of brushes. And I really love the way that they come together. They have like blending versions, and they have, like painting versions and blending versions, highlighting versions, things of that nature, where you can change all the different hardnesses. It's very much like Procreate, I imagine, in terms of like
Yep.
being able to change the hardnesses, being able to change how much it blends, being able to change
Yep.
whether or not it's blending or adding or subtracting or erasing or things of that nature. Yeah, it's
We
very
could
much like
probably
what
do, I mean, we could probably do like a whole entire series on brushes
oh
of Procreate
my
and
God, 100%.
Photoshop and like what those actually mean and what those words, similar to the way we were talking about colors earlier, and what does luminosity mean? What does saturation mean? Same sort of thing goes into brushes, because
Yeah.
you could sit there with a brush, I could sit there with a brush, Kat could sit there with a brush, and we could all create something that looks totally different just by toggling some of those little settings, even though we're using the same exact brush.
Well, and the great thing about digital is that unlike analog, the great thing about digital, you find something you like, you save it. You
Yes.
save it. You save that as a brush preset, and then
Yep.
now that's your blender. That's your
Yep.
blender. You like that blender? Perfect. That's your blender. You save it. You save it as Cat's blender, and then it's Cat's blender. And
But
it's
don't
it's
make your world too small like me, where I pretty much just use the same brush for everything, because I know exactly what it does and how it works, and I know everything about it because I made it. So it's like I know that when I take it to this size, what happens, and this opacity. So yeah.
That makes sense. Well, no, but there's nothing wrong with having tools in your box, though. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. If you have something that works, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Is that the phrase?
I like
I mean,
that.
there is something to be said about that. I like to mix things up because I like to play with stuff, and that's fun for me. But that doesn't mean not everybody has to. And speaking of things Mello has done, this is so pretty. Talk about it.
Absolutely. So this is Blue Velvet. As I mentioned, I was thinking of that like vintage Americana kind of vibe. So now you see the sapphire and the red that we talked about when we're going through my creative process. And you'll see, obviously, I have like the skin color, the eyes, I obviously used the blue for. The hair, I pulled in some brown. So this is where you start expanding your color palette as well. And you'll notice that I don't have the same brown, for instance, all across. I don't have the same red all across. Well, as a layer, those are actually all the same, like it was a fill, because that's how I approached it. But what I went through and did is with an airbrush and then messing around with the luminosity and the opacity is created highlights and lowlights using
Mhm.
still the same brown, but just being able to accent it and show a little bit more dimension and ultimately depth behind it. One of the things I love doing, I don't know if it's like my like calming type practice. Everyone has a different thing. Some people it's like a Zen garden. Other people it's like doing laundry for some reason. Mine is I love like shading things. I think it's just fun for some reason. So I of
Too.
course went through here
I
and
used
like I
to.
loved playing with the shade. I loved thinking about, okay, where is the light in this? And if the light is here, what is that creating? What do the shadows look like on her body? And all that is really just taking, I guess it was probably true black actually. Sometimes I'll use a brown or a purple, but this one was probably a true black if I had to guess. I think it was slightly off. It's not like black black, but it was like very close to it. And then I just colored on it to where it's like, oh my gosh, you destroyed it. And then
Mm.
I clipped it to that original reference layer and then lightened it. So lightened it, I used the wrong word there because it's technically
Oh,
opacity. So I lightened your ability to see through it so you could actually
one more.
see through to the bottom layer. And then that's how those look like shadows, but that's just a brush stroke of a dark color that I then lined out. So I think the only other main thing that I did here is I did want to make sure that she really popped off the page. I, similar to Catalyst, had done like a background as well and had the different colors in the palette. I'm like, no, I just want her to be the focal. So I stripped it all out and just made a plain black background. And then I went through and I re-outlined the parts of her features that I wanted to really pop if they didn't pop enough with just the subtle shading.
thing I absolutely love about the colors that you chose and how you chose to use them here is if you want to just take a look at the hair really quick. This is I was trying to find the best. I think the best example is right here. So this is a very warm highlight, which means the light is hitting it. This is a cooler highlight, which means the hair is highlighted, but it's not specifically the light. So you can see like right here and right here, that's like a warm brown highlight, like almost a gold, right? And then this is more of a gray that's toned down. Like it's such a subtle but beautiful thing that adds dimension to this. Like the light is definitely hitting her hair right here. And then this part of her hair is lighter because hair is like that, but not specifically being hit by the light. And I just love the way you did that. I think it's so beautiful. I just
Maybe it
think
comes from
I
me
think
being
you
this
did
like
the right thing.
little kid and like always having just yellow scribble hair in all my pictures. And I'm like,
Oh,
no, blonde hair
totally.
doesn't look that way. There's
Oh my
dark and
gosh.
light in it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, actually. No, because I had red hair, but people would just, like, scribble orange, and I'm like, "Well,
Right?
it's not orange, actually, because my hair's, like, auburn. It's not really orange, actually, it has, like, brown and blonde and whatever." Like,
Exactly.
yeah, the overall color is, like, red. I'm a redhead, but there's such subtle variations, and there's just such subtle whatevers. The being blonde, though, that's gotta be hard because blonde is actually really hard to paint. Like,
Yeah.
it's very hard to make it look realistic. Like, it's so
Yep.
hard because in blonde, a lot of the colors aren't yellow at all, like, at
Right.
all. Like, they don't have
Hmm.
anything to do with yellow. Like,
Yellow.
purple is in there, blue is in
Yeah.
there. You know what I mean? Like, they don't
Exactly.
have anything to do with yellow. And it's and the more yellow you put, unless somebody's like a bright golden bleach blonde, the more yellow you put, the less realistic it's gonna look.
It's typically how
Um,
you can also tell if someone has like dyed versus natural, is you'll see
mhm.
just a little bit more in the different colors of strands of hair that they have versus when you think of when someone dyes it, even if they do like a really rich dye and they have multiple colors and shades, it's
Mhm.
still truly ever be able to replicate how there's literally like full pieces of hair that are brown, like
Oh,
or
100%. Yeah.
like, but this is blonde. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, because the hair your all your individual hair, just like the pointillism that makes up what's the word? You love this word. What's
Halftone?
the word? Halftone. Thank you.
Yes. I love halftones.
Just like halftone and just like when things are getting printed, your hair's like that too. It's made up of a whole
Yeah,
bunch of colors and strands. And yeah,
absolutely.
so your hair reads blonde, but actually there's so many other colors. There's white in there, there's every all different
Yeah.
types of colors. And oh, the other thing I wanted to notice, because this has been in our pocket for a minute, we made these right around the 4th of July.
Mm.
And I just love the mellow and vintage Americana. Like, if mine, I think, was done on the 4th of July. Like, I was
Yeah.
literally sitting here after I was done listening to the fireworks, petting my cats, and
I
coloring
was like,
this
yours
right.
looks like fireworks, right? Like, she's inspired by the fireworks, and I'm like, there's
Yeah,
America in there somewhere with the flag
America.
or something.
Yeah, but, like, good, like, subtle, not like
Yeah.
yeah, I like it. I like it. Her eyes are amazing too. Her eyes feel vampiric to me. Like, very, like,
Yeah.
a vampy sort of, like she doesn't seem as though she's fully human, and I just love that.
Thank you, and
Oh,
I think I was listening to Lana Del Rey at the time, so the Blue Velvet is one of her
uh,
songs as well. Because I was like, "Blue, like this blue." I love that blue, by the way. I probably have
it's
it
such a
right now
good
in the
color.
room that I'm in. I have a lot of that color actually, but it's just so
It's such a good
rich.
color.
Yeah, so rich.
Yeah.
So looking at these side by side, I think is just so striking because if you remember, we started with a line art drawing, so it gave no indication of light sources, ethnicity, what she's wearing, time frame, nothing. So to
Mhm.
think about how both of these came from the same starting line art and then us just creating our own palettes and kind of going down that path and doing our whole creative process, where each of these ended up, they are both incredibly striking and just visually rich. I mean, I could just stare. I want either of these on my wall, to be totally honest. I remember like when I first saw Catalyst, when we pulled this together for this episode, I think the first thing I said is, "I would have never, ever thought of that." Like, it's
Mhm.
almost like I wouldn't even thought to approach it in that way, and then once I saw it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, that's genius," and then you start,
Mhm.
like, piecing it together, you're like, "Wow, that's really cool."
Yeah, no, when I saw those, I was like, "Oh, that's so pretty." so pretty. Like she looks like she could be a torch singer or someone, like she's the femme fatale in a murder mystery. I mean,
Femme
she's
fatale, yeah. I debated actually
yeah,
doing femme fatale, I'm not gonna lie,
yeah,
but then it was the one. I had to go with the blue velvet, but yeah, femme
yeah,
fatale is also
100%.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, it's just it's so stunning and it's so beautiful. Like and they are such different, but like these are completely
Yeah,
different women. Completely different women.
100%. If you told
They're
me those
even
were the
wearing
exact same drawing, I don't actually think I'd believe you. I really don't.
they're even their dresses, which are the exact same dress with the same lines and the same whatever, their dresses are completely different. This is a different fabric, this is a different material.
Yeah,
This is a different, they're like this is clearly a swim cover up, and this is clearly a fancy, beautiful evening gown. You
yeah.
know? Like
Well,
it's
next time you
just
look
the
at a
way it's
coloring book, right? Just imagine
Mhm.
like the potential for what those pages could be given in anyone's hands is totally different.
100%. And that's where color comes in.
Yeah, no.
And
So
speaking of that,
right? We thought it only fair for you to be able to try out the same coloring page that we used. So I threw it on website as well as on my Ko-fi, and you can download it for free. And there is already it's set up for you. So you just literally import it into Photoshop, import it into your Paint. If you use something like Microsoft Paint or something very simple, you can also import it into Procreate. There's a PDF and PNG in there, all set up for you in the color spaces. So you can just jump in and get started. And definitely check out the slideshow that goes along with this episode because it has the links as well as the podcast companion because they're all obviously together in the podcast companion. But you'll be able to download it and then you can also reference the palettes that we used and all of the tips and tricks that we had earlier on into creating your own palette.
I hope you do that. And if you do that, tag us with this is not exactly the artist prompt, but do tag us with the hashtag
And we'd
ArtInqMe so
love
that
to
we
see it.
can. I know I would really love to see it because ours turned out so different, and I didn't have any idea how different they would even be.
Yeah, no,
Like, and I would love to see what you guys do with this because it
absolutely.
was so much fun for us that I hope that I just want you to join us. Please do, and
Something
tag
I'd like yeah, tag us. Yeah, tag
yeah
us.
tag us
Tag
tag
us.
us 100% tag us.
Something personally, despite me being a digital artist and loving art, loving creating art, something I genuinely enjoy is coloring. And a
No,
lot of
me
times
too.
people are always like thrown off by it because it's like, well, someone else made it. Like we're just coloring. I'm like, no, there's so much you can do with
Mhm.
coloring though. And it's also got this like vibe to it where you can kind of just like unplug for a little bit and just let yourself be creative without having to think too much. So that's why, too, I think early in the process, both Kat and I picked colors that we'd be using early on. Yeah, there were other
Well,
ones that we maybe like peppered in, but a lot of that takes out the decision making and lets you then be creative during the process. So you're not like, oh, which purple was that? Which blue was that? You have your
yeah.
palette kind of established. So you're just grabbing out of the crayon box and you're not sitting there with 64, 128. You've got the 8 pack that you're 4 pack, even, I think, that you really want to use.
Yeah, and then once we had chosen our palette, that's like you just keep those things together. That's your color harmonies too, right? You just put everything else away. Just get rid of all the rest of the colors. It's fine. Put the box over there. Put the Crayola box over there, unless you need to sharpen it, you know. And then, and then you just use and it's just it makes things so much easier. I love to color too, by the way. I absolutely adore it. I don't do it nearly often enough, but I have done it a lot more since we did this challenge. Um, this challenge did inspire me to get a Wacom tablet so that I could not have to
Not
use
use the mouse?
this yeah, I could not have to use that. It did inspire me to get a Wacom tablet, and I have been really enjoying like, when I just need a minute, you know what I mean? Like, a
Mhm.
lot of times you just need a minute, right, in life, and when I just need a minute, I just do that,
Yeah.
and it's so helpful, and it's interesting too because since I've started doing that, I've started really picking palettes again in advance. I do this with painting and things of this nature, but that involves, like, pulling out paints, pulling out this, pulling out that, making sure you clean your brushes, all that stuff. Just coloring, ugh, so nice. Speaking of that though, and our InkMe, whoa, 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 what happened there? Oh, never mind. Oh, I clicked the link. Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. These have links, by the way. When you go into and you're looking at the deck that we have in our companion blog post, these have links. You can just click them, and that's what happens.
That's actually an important call out if you haven't noticed thus far in our companion blog post where it says slideshow, that's an interactive slideshow. So not only can you flip the pages, you can click all the links, you can watch videos that are embedded. It's really meant to give you all the resources that we talked about and more. There's so much, like we had mentioned even earlier, that we necessarily can't use, every single one in one episode. So we hope that this is just the beginning of your conversation with color, really.
But now it's your turn. So for our artist prompt, we wanted to just challenge you to go beyond your comfort colors. Everybody does have comfort colors. Everybody's got a favorite color. All right, well, let's use that, but let's try to use it in a new way and pair it with another color or explore a different color combo or maybe a color harmony that you haven't tried before and just see how you like it. Just see how it changes the way that you look at your favorite color. And then let's see the magic. We just want you to post that with the hashtag ArtInqMe. You have to art ink.
Me.
Yeah, you have to art ink us with this. Well, I guess you don't have to. You know what I mean? It's okay. You
Yeah,
don't.
if you don't want to share it,
But
it's
it
no
would be
big
so
deal.
cool if you did, though. Right?
I mean,
Like,
imagine the connection you would make with Catalyst if you picked her favorite child as, the way that you approached color. Like if you picked that type. I'm just saying, if you remember what
or
that
if you made a
was.
case, or if you made a case for square, which is my least favorite type.
Ooh,
You made
ooh,
a case
square
for
is hard, but I think
yes,
that sounds like a challenge within a challenge now.
does. It
Hmm.
does. It does.
Hmm.
Hashtag justice for square. Yes.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, so please, mess around with some other colors. Go outside of your typical comfort color. And what's really great is you can start with your favorite color. A lot of the things that I do is blue. Blue is my favorite color. I love blue so much. You saw that even in
Wait.
the other one. But I hate green, and you saw green in my other one. I'm not really a
Yeah,
big red fan. You saw red in my other one. That's because blue's got to have some friends, So
gotcha.
it's a really cool way for you to actually learn more about your favorite color and to see what it vibes with, and how when you change just the environment that your color is in, how it can read different and have a different emotional feel, even just because of the crew that it's with.
Yeah, 100%. You always gotta see how things combine. And yeah, and think about your vibe too, because we talked about this earlier, but it's just as a reminder, think about your vibe because you don't necessarily have to create things that harmonize. You can also use
Mhm.
Discord in order
Yeah,
to create a mood. And I think people forget that a lot. I think people think a lot about like matching colors or making them go together. There is a place for when they don't.
absolutely.
There is definitely a place for when they don't. So that's all up to you. It's your creative challenge and it's all about color and we want to see it.
And you are not alone because, like we said, we've got tons of resources for you. Inside the blog post companion, we have all the links to all the tools that we talked about. You can download the coloring page if you want to. You can refer to the slideshow that we went through, tons and tons of things. And if you think about the artist prompt and how you want to approach it from a different palette perspective, we got you. So definitely check that out. Make sure you click the links, do the things, share some work. And that way, we can also share your work with the community too. So don't forget for the artist prompt, hashtag ArtInqMe, and then we can see and share your design. And I just think that this whole entire episode, we started off with wanting to better understand color because we use color every day. We talk about color, but really understanding how it actually works, how we perceive it, the importance of it, what it also means to other people, and making sure things are, practical and accessible, and trying to, blend the art and science of color. We hope that we did what we promised back in the beginning, right?
Well, can you use color with confidence? You tell us down in the comments down below. But we hope that we've given you a few more tools in order to make that confidence a reality.
And with that, I'm Mela,
And I'm Kat.
and
And
this
this
is Art Inquiry.